and welcome back to Football League World TV. The season is upon us and it's time for the EFL weekend preview. It's good to be back. I'm your host, Alfie Burns, and joining me is my colleague, Ben Wignall. Ben, how are you getting on this morning?
Yeah, I'm very excited for the new season to start. It feels like it's been a bit of a lifetime, really, since I've last seen my club, Preston North End play. I've even become a cricket fan over the summer, without much football to watch. But yeah, I'm very excited. I'll be at Wigan tomorrow to watch PNE. But obviously the season starts tonight, and I'm even looking forward to watching a Burnley game, which I wouldn't say normally. But yeah, I'm very excited for the EFL action to kick off.
We're going to be looking at 6 fixtures across the EFL from the Championship, League One and League Two. Of course, we're streaming across Facebook, YouTube and Twitter this morning. So if you're joining us, we want to hear from you. We want your predictions in for the games that we're discussing. So please do get yourselves in the comments. As we usually do on this show, we'll kick things off with the Championship and we'll start by discussing tonight's game between Huddersfield Town and Burnley, the EFL curtain raiser. Of course, Huddersfield 90 minutes from the Premier League last season under Carlos Corberán. Burnley were 90 minutes away from staying in the Premier League. 2 new managers at the helm in Danny Schofield at Huddersfield and Vincent Kompany at Burnley. Ben, first question regarding this game is, how big a rebuild do both these managers have, and who do you think's got the biggest rebuild?
I think it's Huddersfield who might have the biggest rebuild, simply because they've lost 2 massive players in Lewis O'Brien and Harry Toffolo. We know what Burnley have done this summer. They've lost some big players, Nick Pope, Dwight McNeil, Nathan Collins have all gone back to the Premier League. But I think Burnley have put the money where the mouth is and use some of that money to replace the players who've spent a large chunk of money this summer, probably the most in the Championship, to replace those departed players. And it looks a far cry from the kind of squad that Sean Dyche would have been building in the Premier League. There's a lot of young, hungry, talented players in that Burnley squad now. But I think it's different for Huddersfield. They've got a head coach that's got no experience in senior management, and it's going to be very hard to replace the likes of Toffolo and O'Brien. I know they've made signings already, but I think this calibre of signings they've made, I think the jury's out on them. The likes of Kasumu, Boyle and Rudoni haven't played at this level before. Nakayama, Japan international, can he replace Levi Colwill effectively? Time will tell, but he's definitely got a decent pedigree. But overall, I think Huddersfield's current transfer business, it wouldn't particularly thrill me. They've got a lot to prove, and I think to replace Toffolo and O'Brien is going to have to spend a little bit of money, and I don't know if that's going to happen under Dean Hoyle, but it's definitely a bigger rebuild job for Danny Schofield, I think, taking over from Carlos Corberán.
Spoke to Danny Schofield yesterday and he was sort of discussing the new signings and how it probably wouldn't be healthy to throw them all in at once. So I think there'll be a sort of real transition period for Huddersfield at the start of this season. I think tonight's lineup will have a lot of last season's players in, of course, without Toffolo and O'Brien. As for Kompany, though, he's not really got that luxury, has he, at Burnley, where so much has changed and it's going to be a very different 11 to the one that finished last season. How do you think that's going to impact Burnley's start to the season, Ben?
I'm not sure. I think he's been trialling a different system in pre-season. I think Burnley have been used to playing a 4-4-2 for the last few years, but it looks like he's gone with kind of 4 midfielders, but kind of 2 defensive midfielders and 2 attacking midfielders. So it's a lot different to what Burnley are used to playing, and obviously with a lot of new players, they need to gel quite quickly. And Kompany, I assume, has been working very hard on the training ground to make that happen. But I don't particularly think they're at a disadvantage. I think they're desperate for some new strikers, but I think they've got enough in the midfield and defence. I think they've improved. Well, not improved because they've still got a lot to prove. These players that have come in, because there's the likes of Scott Twining and Lou McNally have played at League One, but they've yet to be tested in the Championship. So in that sense, some of the players have got something to prove. But I definitely think it's probably an exciting time to be a Burnley fan. I know that sounds a bit silly considering they've just been relegated, but they've reinvested the money that they've brought in from player sales, and I think there's still more to do in this transfer window. Maxwell Cornet might leave, and they definitely need some new forwards. But I definitely think there's plenty of reasons to be optimistic if you are a Burnley fan.
Let's get your prediction for this game then, Ben.
It's a tough one. Obviously, Huddersfield were very tough last season to beat for the most part, and they have kept a lot of that nucleus. But I just think Burnley might edge this one 2-1.
You're back in Lancashire. I'll back Yorkshire. I'll go 2-1 the other way. Huddersfield win. Moving on to tomorrow's action then, we're going to look at another recently relegated side in Norwich City. They travel to Cardiff City in a 3 p.m. kick-off. We'll start with the hosts, Cardiff. A lot of new signings this summer. Ben, we won't go through all of them, but what kind of job do you think Steve Morrison's going to have, sort of getting all these players to gel and then hit the ground running in the Championship?
Yeah, I think we'll be here all day. We're talking about Cardiff's individual signings. I think Morrison showed enough about him last season, as a head coach, that he could potentially get better out of Cardiff than Mick McCarthy did. But it is a lot of changes in a short period of time. It'll be interesting to see how he lines up. Predominantly played a 3-5-2 last season, but in recent weeks we've seen Chio join Jadon Philogen coming on loan from Aston Villa, and they're both predominantly play out wide, don't they? So it'll be interesting to see how he lines up. But he has added kind of there's a mix of experience and younger, hungry players to come into Cardiff. But I still think there'll be a big emphasis on bringing youth through as well. He was the under-23s head coach before we got the permanent head coach gig, and I think it could be a very big season for the likes of Ruben Colwill, who's an academy graduate, and he showed signs last season that he's ready to break out and be a Championship star, and the likes of Mark McGuinness as well at the back, who played a lot last season. This could be a season defining moment for him, being a regular, and he's got that Arsenal pedigree as well, so he's got a lot of potential. But I think with a lot of changes, they'll have to bear with the first few weeks. The results might not always be there, and I think Morrison will have to work to find out what his best lineup is. And I think you can't really get much tougher starts than Norwich, can you? I think that's a real stinker for them in the first game of the season. It could be a tough one to get through.
On Norwich then, what kind of shape do you feel that they're in heading back to the Championship? Probably the last 2 times they've been at this level, they've won the title reasonably comfortably.
I think they're in a good position. I know it sounds a bit silly to say considering they finished bottom of the Premier League, but not really made many changes, have they? The team's remained intact from last season, and they've added a couple of players here and there. And like I said, I don't think this is a good time for a good first fixture for Cardiff, because Norwich kind of got that consistency going in from last season. In pre-season, they've looked half decent as well, and a lot of this team were promoted in 2020, 21 under Daniel Farke, so they know what it takes to get up, and I don't think they'll be phased with the new challenges of the Championship. And I expect them to grind out a lot of wins this season. They've got a manager in Dean Smith who, of course, knows what it takes to get out of this league, having been promoted with Aston Villa. So I think Norwich are in pretty good shape. They don't particularly need to add too many more players to the squad. They've got a pretty well-balanced, well-rounded squad already, so I can see them going strong again this season.
Let's get your prediction for this game then, Ben.
I can see Norwich getting a solid 2-0 win. I think it'll take a few weeks for Cardiff to gel with the new signings they've got, and it's a pretty tough first fixture for them, so I'm going for a comfortable Norwich win.
Yeah, I think that Norwich will get the 3 points here as well. I'll go slightly narrower. I'll go 1-0 away victory for Norwich. Tomorrow night's televised game then is between Middlesbrough and West Brom, amongst the promotion favourites in the Championship. Chris Wilder versus Steve Bruce. Ben, out of the two, Middlesbrough and West Brom, who do you think's better set for a push for automatic promotion?
I think with the business that's been done so far, I think West Brom have probably improved the most from last season. Obviously, it was a very disappointing one, finishing in 10th position when they would have expected to be right up there. Obviously, it didn't work out for Valérien Ismaël and Steve Bruce's effect coming in. If February didn't quite work out, but the business they've done this summer's been really strong. John Swift and Jed Wallace on free transfers are a massive coup considering what they've done for Reading and Millwall respectively, and it makes their midfield and the final third look a lot stronger than what it did last season. I think they do have reservations defensively. Maybe they've lost Matt Clark, who's gone back to Brighton on loan. Certainly, if they could get him back, maybe permanently, it'd be a good fit. But obviously, Darryl O'Shea missed a lot of last season. He could potentially just slot back in there like he did at the back end of last season. And strikers wise as well, DK and Grant up there, they've got two strikers, at the back of the net. So I think West Brom, if they can, with Steve Bruce's new system, obviously went 3-5-2 a lot of the time last season. When he arrived, he's already made it clear he's going forward at the back. So if they suit that system, then I can see West Brom being a real threat. And I think Middlesbrough, a team who definitely have potential, but they've still got a lot of business, especially up front. They've gone into the final week of pre-season with just Duncan Watmore and Josh Corbin as the natural out-and-out strikers. I know they've added Marcus Forrest since then, and it's an exciting signing, but I think they still need more at the top end of the pitch, maybe one or two new attackers, and they might just prove a little bit blunt in attack because of Forrest hasn't not had enough time to blend into Chris Wilder's plans yet. So I don't think they'll be firing on Saturday evening, but defensively they'll look very solid, and they'll be more than a match for West Brom's new attacking players. Darragh Lenihan's been added to that back line, and if he starts alongside Dale Fry and Paddy McNair, then that's on paper one of the best Championship back threes in the division. So I think that will be a real battle. But right now, I think West Brom have a better set to make a promotion push. But by the end of the transfer window, I think Middlesbrough could be bigger favourites than them to go.
This game in isolation, then there's so many good players are going to be on the pitch at the Riverside. Where do you think the key battle is?
I think it'll be Middlesbrough's defence against West Brom's attack. Obviously, like I've said, Swift and Wallace have been added to that West Brom attack, and if they can bring their form from their previous clubs to the Baggies, then I think that's going to be a real boost for Steve Bruce and their attacking threat. And they've obviously, like I said, got Colin Grant and Daryl Deaker, who know where the back of the net is. But I think Middlesbrough's defence is more than a match for them. Paddy McNair, Dale Fry, Darragh Lenihan, they're all top Championship defenders. And I just think with Middlesbrough's lack of striking options right now, I think they'd be happy with getting a draw out of this first game of the season. Obviously, West Brom were up and down last season, and they had a real bad blip mid-season. But I think with the additions they've made, they're definitely a lot stronger on paper, especially. So I think definitely Middlesbrough's defence against West Brom's attacks the main battle I see coming out on the pitch on Saturday night.
Let's have your prediction for this one then, Ben.
I'm going to go with a draw. I think Middlesbrough will be happy with that, considering the transfer business has still got left to do. So I'm going to go with a 1-1 at the Riverside.
Got a comment in from Wayne. He's back in Middlesbrough with a 3-1 win. I'm going to agree with you though, Ben. I think that this will end up a draw. I fancy a few more goals than that, given it's the opening weekend. I'm going to go 2-2, but a really entertaining game at the Riverside Stadium. Moving down into League One then, I think the team that everybody's sort of looking at with a load of intrigue this summer is Derby County. They host Oxford at Pride Park. We'll start with Derby, summer of downs and then ups for the Rams. How do you expect the Pride Park atmosphere to be tomorrow, Ben?
I think it'll be very good. I think obviously they didn't have a lot to cheer about last season. I know they had some good results, but obviously ultimately ended in relegation. But I think with the new ownership, especially the new owner being a Derby County fan, I think it's going to be kind of a jubilant party atmosphere, and that I think that can only help the players going into it. They've had obviously a tough pre-season. They've had some tough games, but they've also had some good results. But I think, you know, Curtis Davies made it pretty clear a few weeks ago that they're probably still behind most League One clubs when it comes to the preparation, because they got started later than most. And when it came to bringing players in, they've got a whole host of new faces that need to gel. So it might not end up starting amazingly for Derby, but I think they've got the kind of players in through the door that means it can have a positive start, even though they've got a tough task against Oxford.
There's been loads of signings and loads of signings quite recently, some high-profile names as well, Ben. Do you think that Rossini has got a real job on his hands getting them, you know, like we spoke about Morrison earlier, getting them hitting the ground running right from the start?
I think he does, but I think they're up to it. You know, I think it'd be different if there's a lot of younger players coming in and they're not used to having senior experience of football. But I think he's got a really good mix of the players he currently had at Derby, you know, the likes of Jason Knight and Max Bird, who are young players, but they've got that championship experience. But he's also added to that with a lot of experienced players like, you know, Conor Hourihan, Tom Barkers, and James Chester, just to name a few. So I think that'll make the gelling process a little bit easier. And I think even though they did have a later start than most to their pre-season schedule, I think they'll be right up for it, even though it is a tough opening assignment against Oxford. I think Derby will be right up for it and primed to get a big result.
Got another comment in from Wayne. He's backing Oxford to win this game. They're a seasoned League One sort of top 10 side now, aren't they, under Carl Robinson? It's going to be a big test for Derby.
Yeah, it will be a big test, and I think Oxford will be, you know, buoyed by the fact that Cameron Brannigan signed his new deal, turned down Blackpool to stay at Oxford, and you know, I think everything does go through him in the middle. So he's a real creative presence in that engine room, and I think that's a really big boost for Oxford going into this. I know they've lost Luke McNally to Burnley, but I think Stuart Findlay, with his experience in Scotland and the MLS, that's a decent replacement as well. And they've also added some, you know, decent wingers. You know, they lost Nathan Holland. His loan with the club ended and he ended up going to MK Dons, but I think Robinson's gone down the more experienced route and brought in Josh Murphy and Yannick Wilshut. I think both players have something to prove. But I think dropping down to League One level, both of them, they should be fine players for that level, and they should bring a sense of, you know, goals and assists. If both of them play on Saturday, I think they could, you know, kind of maybe exploit Derby. I think they're probably at the weakest in the fullback areas. Obviously, Lee Buchanan and Nathan Byrne have both left, and I don't think they've necessarily been replaced strongly this summer. So I think that could be an area that Derby could be exploited in by Oxford. But I think both teams are looking pretty strong when it comes to the starting 11s, and I'm expecting a few goals in this one.
Let's get your prediction then.
I'm going to go for 3-2 Derby win. I've said there's probably going to be goals, so I can't shy away from that. I just think Derby will, with the experience they've got, and I know they've had a difficult pre-season with how late they've had to start, but I do think they'll, with the atmosphere behind them, they'll get the job done on the day.
I think it's going to be a little bit of a sort of rude awakening for Derby heading down into League One. I think that the atmosphere will be fantastic, but I do fancy Oxford to maybe just edge this 2-1. Two other big names in League One clash this weekend. Sheffield Wednesday hosting Portsmouth. Big game at Hillsborough. We'll start with the home side, Sheffield Wednesday. They lost out in the playoffs last season under Darren Moore, who has been backed again this summer with some really good business done for the Owls. Do you think there's a lot of pressure on Darren Moore to get off to a good start in League One this season, Ben?
It is definite pressure, yeah. There's been some, you know, statement signings this summer of, you know, Michael Smith and Michael Heckwig, both taken from Rotherham, and also Will Volks is coming as well from Cardiff. They're all, you know, top League One players who've proved they're solid in the Championship, and it does prove you can get backed and not have to pay transfer fees. And you've got some very good players through the door, and you know, considering they are one of the pre-season favourites for promotion, there will be pressure from the board to have a strong start and be in them promotion places within the first few months. But I think they also need to make sure that the injury list isn't like it was last year, because I think within the first couple of months of the season, it's pretty brutal, especially in defence. You know, they had to play Marvin Johnson as a left-sided centre-back for a little bit, which showed how how bad it had got. I think one of the most important things this season is to keep Josh Windass fit, because he spent a large part of last season on the sidelines with hamstring injuries, and I think Sheffield Wednesday made a big statement by rejecting bids from Argentina for Windass's services, and now he needs to kind of repair the faith in the club by staying injury free and banging the goals in, because obviously he had a decent record before he ended up getting injured again last season for the remainder of the campaign. So I think he's got something to prove in League One, but I think Darren Moore's side, they could probably do one more striker, but I think they're very well equipped to make a push for promotion this season.
Let's talk about Portsmouth then. Portsmouth are a club that I really can't sort of put my finger on under Danny Cowley. I don't really know what the aim is this season, what they're going to do, where they're going to be in the table. What are your thoughts with Pompey at the minute, Ben?
Yeah, I'm a bit like you. I always expect them to push for promotion. Obviously, Danny Cowley's got a good record as well with his managerial career, but I was earlier in the summer, I was a bit puzzled why they weren't really doing much transfer business. Seemed to be getting pipped to certain players as well. But I think in recent weeks they've shown some real progression in the transfer market, and I think the squad's looking a lot stronger. I know they've lost Marcus Harness to Ipswich, but I think the patience that some fans have shown's paid off, because some of the signings he made are pretty good for me. I think Colby Bishop, a very solid League One striker with Accrington for the last couple of years. Dane Scarlett's a very exciting talent from Tottenham. He obviously needs to prove his quality in the EFL, but his record for Tottenham's under-23s and England under-19s is certainly very exciting. You've got Josh Griffiths in to replace Gavin Bazunu in goal. He's an exciting talent from West Brom, and even Joe Piggott's a good signing. I think Danny Cowley's a manager who can get the best out of him. He didn't have the best season at Ipswich last season, but I think Cowley is a manager who can get the best out of big physical strikers, and that's what Piggott is. And I think with the signings they have made in recent weeks, you'd have to expect them to be in and around the top six. I think it would be a disappointment if they missed out again. It's definitely a tough first game to go up against Sheffield Wednesday, though. But I do think once they've got this one out of the way, it does get a bit easier on paper, and they could be one of those teams to break into the top six. Obviously, it would have been disappointing to miss out last year by a fair few places, but I think they're definitely better equipped this season to make a go of it.
Let's get your prediction for this game then, Ben.
I said it was a tough one for Pompey, and I'm going to go with them to lose. I'm going to go with a 2-0 Sheffield Wednesday win. I know Pompey have got some fresh new strikers, but I just think Sheffield Wednesday will be far too strong.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely pressure on Darren Moore to deliver at Hillsborough this season, but I'm backing him to get off to a good start. I'll go 2-1 to the Owls. Finally down into League Two then, two Northerners on the show. So I've picked a Yorkshire derby between Bradford and Doncaster. We'll start with Bradford, high-profile manager in Mark Hughes. They're amongst the favourites to win the League Two title this season. Did we see enough quality in Mark Hughes' Bradford to sort of warrant that last season, Ben?
I think so, yeah. I think they ended the season really strongly. They had 3 wins in a row they were all pretty convincing wins, and I think in his 13 matches in charge, there were 5 wins and 3 draws. So it was kind of a mixed bag, but I think it's more the kind of summer recruitment that's maybe, slingshotting them into a kind of favouritism for promotion. They have lost some good players. Obviously, Charles Vernon and Pody O'Connor and Elliot Watt have all left, and I think O'Connor, especially being the player of the season for 2 years running, is a massive loss. But I think some of the players he brought in just shows kind of the pull that Bradford still have in League Two. Richie Smallwood was a regular for Hull last season in the Championship, and he's dropped down 2 levels to play for Bradford, and he should be one of the best midfielders in League Two, period. And they've also brought in, Verdane Oliver, Harry Chapman, Jamie Walker. There's real talent there in the final third. I think defensively, though, they could be a little bit weaker. Obviously, O'Connor's a big player to replace. I know they brought Timmy Odesina in, who played for Hartlepool on loan last season. He looks to be a decent player, but I still would like them to, if I was a backer of Bradford for promotion, I'd like them to add to defence a bit more. But I definitely think they're in a strong position to make a promotion push. They're kind of a sleeping giant of League Two, are they, for the crowds to get the size of the club they are? So I think the manager they've got, the players they've got, they're definitely primed for a promotion push.
As for Doncaster, then, they were disappointingly relegated out of League One. Gary McSheffrey's already sort of faced with a bit of an injury crisis. So many players, sort of not being available for this weekend. What's a successful season for Donny, do you think, Ben? Obviously, you'd naturally say to bounce straight back into League One, but it doesn't really feel like that for Doncaster.
No, it doesn't. But looking at the squad on paper, I think they've definitely got enough to be challenging for the playoffs. I know it's definitely not ideal this weekend that they're missing a lot of attacking players, especially Lee Tomlin, Luke Molyneux, Rio Griffiths all set to be out. So that's not exactly ideal when you've got as tough a game as Bradford away. But definitely think they've got some real good experience for League Two. They brought Harrison Biggins in from Fleetwood, who's had a few decent seasons in League One. George Miller scored goals for Walsall last season. He's a kind of an exciting permanent signing. He can definitely work himself back up the EFL pyramid after leaving Barnsley. But then you look through the team, you've got the likes of, Kieran Airgord, Adam Clayton, Tommy Rowe. These are real kind of experienced past Championship and League One players now. Obviously, League Two is probably getting tougher every year, especially with the teams that are coming in with the likes of, when you see Stockport winning the National League and now they're favourites to go up. It kind of shows how League Two is getting a bit more money in than it used to. But I definitely think Doncaster have got a squad capable of challenging for the top seven. Obviously, Gary McSheffrey's a novice manager. It was only his kind of first half season in charge last season, but he's definitely got a group there that's got the kind of nucleus and nous to do well next season.
Let's get your prediction for this one then, Ben.
Yeah, I think it'll be tough for Doncaster going into this one with so many attacking players missing. So I'm going to go with a 2-0 Bradford win to kick off the campaign.
Yeah, I think I'm going to back Bradford as well here. I'll go 3-1. I'll go for Doncaster to get a goal, but Bradford to come out on top. That concludes this week's weekend preview. Thanks to Ben for joining me, and thanks to everybody else getting themselves in the comments. It's been great to hear from so many people. Of course, we can't cover every game across the EFL, but if you do want to hear more about your club on the channel, then please do leave a comment on YouTube and we'll pick it up and we'll try and get your club on the show next week. Coming up later today on Football League World TV, we're concluding the Fans Voice series for the week with a look at Peterborough United heading back down into League One. Marcus Ali is joined by Alex Batt, I think, to discuss Porsche. Please do tune in for that. Take care between now and then, and of course enjoy all the EFL action that's coming up this weekend. We'll see you again soon.